Hello, everyone. Welcome to CACA webinar. So today, we invited Mr. Geoff Faden, the President and the CEO of MacMod Analytical, to be here. So this is the second part of the webinar series. So in the first part, so now it's available on recording, it's covered the fundamentals of how the column efficiency can be significantly improved by the monodisperse fully porous particle technique. So today he will continue the topic on application side. So on how the new column can be applied to oligonucleotide separations. So first of all, let me have a very quick introduction of CACA and the activities we are going to have in near future. So CACA builds a community for separation scientists, provides support on career development and networking, sponsor webinars, symposium, career symposium and conferences, and award excellent young scientists and students. CAC's main activities include networking and dinner event at PeterCon every year. So now we are planning the dinner event on Monday, March 3rd, during PeterCon in Boston. We also host a networking event at HPLC conference every other year, when it's held in the US. Organize technical session at EAS meeting and other conferences. So for more information, you could visit our website or join social media group at LinkedIn or WeChat. Here is a list of our recent webinars. We archive our past webinars and the recordings are available through the CACA website. We are very grateful for the very strong support for our sponsors, including the MacMod. So here I want to say thank you again. So thank you for your support through the years. The CACA webinar is organized by the webinar team. So if you have any suggestions, comments, or questions, please feel free to reach us. So you can find our contact information here. So we are very looking forward to hearing from you. So for today's webinar, we are very glad to invite Mr. Geoff Faden. So Geoff is the president and the CEO of MacMod Analytical. He received his Bachelor of Science in Chemistry from Pennsylvania State University in 2003 and his MBA from Temple University in 2014. He has served as a trusted chromatography partner for the life science industry for over 15 years. He has experience working with major pharmaceutical, biopharmaceutical, industrial chemical, and environmental companies to improve their workflow and provide innovative solutions to their challenging chromatography-related problems. Geoff has been acknowledged on several publications and posters and has frequently been counted on to provide industry-leading technical support, presentations at conferences, meetings, and on-site customer facilities. Okay, so now let's invite Geoff to give us his talk. So now I'm going to switch the screen, and then it's going to change to Geoff's screen. So it will take a little bit of time. Okay. Yeah. So now, Geoff, please. So now it's your turn. Podium is yours.
Thank you so much, E. So MacMod really appreciates the opportunity to deliver this part 2 of this webinar series. We've been a partner with CACA committee and group for a long time, and looking forward to continuing that into the future. Today, we're going to do a little bit of a review of our last webinar and then go into some really exciting data on oligonucleotide separations without ion pair additives. So the technology that we're using today is the Evosphere monodisperse particle technology. Just to review, there was some innovations, how particles have changed over time. You have the morphology of the particles, so the shape has changed. Usually, the first particles commercially available that were used on a regular basis were irregular, shaped, so they weren't spherical, and then they eventually figured out that we could make spherical particles. And then the size, the original size of the particles that they could control to manufacture, the first original particles were 100 micron, and then, we go down to 50, and then 20, and then 15, and then 10, 5, 3, and now sub 2. And I think the smallest commercial product that is available in a metal column is 1.3 micron. So an innovation over time, they found that if they can control the metals content in the silica, then they can bond and have more reproducible bonding interactions and control those interactions a little bit more. But in legacy applications, metals could add benefits because it could have some acidic character to it. So over time, we sort of progressed to have less metals. And the innovation we're talking about today is the distribution of the size of the particles. So the dynamic volume of the particle distribution is what is being controlled here. And so we'll show you how that's being done and how we measure that. You can look at the comparison of the evosphere. What we're showing is a monodisperse, fully porous particle around 3 micron. And what this is a Coulter counter. So this shows you, basically, it gives a signal as to where the distribution of the particles sit. And so on the front end, you have a percentage, and on the back end you have a percentage, and then you see two commercially available, like what you're currently using. These are very popular commercial silicas, and you can see just how much wider the two sides of those Gaussian peaks are. So if you can narrow the peaks, if you can compress that peak together on the Coulter counter, you can start to measure the monodispersity of the material. And so standard, materials, historically, what they do is they look at the count of particles at the 90th percentile of the curve and at the 10th percentile of the curve. So the higher that, so let's say that the count on a standard 3 micron, let's say the 90th percentile would be like 3.5, and the 10th percentile will be, 2. That wide distribution, when you divide them together, the 290 over 10, you get 1.5. So that's essentially 1.5, 1.6. That's essentially what you'll see in commercially available silicas. What we've done here is taken the 90th percentile and taken the 10th percentile and divided it. But we maintain the pore volume, which is a big step, because you have to still maintain the separation capacity. So being able to look at the D90 over 10 and have it as 1.1, that's what we're classifying now as a monodisperse particle. So visually, you can sort of see this. This is the SEM of one of those materials. You can see there's big spheres and little spheres on the left. That we're classifying now as polydisperse material, And so moving forward, let's say 2022, when this material came to market, we can start looking at sort of classifying it in its own breath. So when you look at, okay, well, so what when we go back and look at the resolution equation, and this graph on the right was done by Peter Carr's group, and they show, how you would graph an impact of retention, N is efficiency, and alpha is selectivity. So N is sort of like, how do you calculate N? And N is what we call sort of the plates of the column. That came from a distillation theory, where they actually had, the original column actually had physical plates in it. But these are what they call theoretical plates. So how do you calculate theoretical plates? Well, to calculate n, it's really how much interaction with the column. So you have the length of the column, and then you divide that by this number called the height equivalent to a theoretical plate. So how do you calculate the height equivalent to a theoretical plate? Well, there was a guy named Van Deemter who theorized that there are three factors that impact the height equivalent to a theoretical plate. You have the A term, the B term, and the C term. So the A term is your eddy diffusion term, or the multipath effect that an analyte can travel through a column. The B term is your longitudinal diffusion, or how much molecular diffusion happens, whether or not it be from the mobile phase diffusing or like the wall effects and things like that. And then you have the C term, which is your resistance to mass transfer. And that's how much resistance you're getting for the analyte to go into the porous packing material. I think you see that previous equation a lot, but it doesn't really necessarily explain why we're seeing what we're seeing with the monodispersity. And so what I did was I dug a little bit deeper, and I'm showing the expanded Van Deemter equation. So when Van Deemter wrote this equation, this is actually what he wrote. And what he showed here is you had to write an equation for gas, so for gas chromatography and liquid chromatography. And then in some cases, depending on whether or not you're looking at gas chromatography, you'll use the equation one way, and if you're looking at liquid chromatography, you'll use it another. So because we're looking at liquid chromatography, on that C term out there, that one portion of it is canceled out, so that goes to 0. So when you actually look at what impact this monodispersity has, so on each term, and in most cases we're looking at, for Van Deemter, he was looking at small molecules, pretty much is what people use the Van Deemter equations for. So small molecules, they tend to, on the C term side, they tend to interact the resistance in and out of the pores is not quite as high because they're moving at such a high velocity. So that kind of minimizes the C term across packing materials for small molecules. So like it's more so as the hydrodynamic volume of that analyte gets bigger and bigger and bigger, then and the pore is structured, then you start to have some resistance as it's turning and moving in and out of the pore. The B term for liquids don't really diffuse because of the other, whether it's hydrogen bonding or dipole-dipole or van der Waals forces, they tend to stay together. Whereas gases, they diffuse very rapidly. So the B term sort of gets minimized as far as the impact to the height equivalent to a theoretical plate. So really for small molecules, you're left with this 2 lambda dp, and dp is particle size. So now you're saying, okay, well, I wanted to go and get a really high plate number, n, and my equation was n is equal to the length of the column, which is fixed, over this height equivalent to a theoretical plate. So if I can compress the amount of plates in there, so how do I get a smaller h is sort of how do I drive h down? And so the lambda value is really what is impacting the h, and that again is the multipath effect. So that's actually how well you can pack the bed of the column. And so sort of visually, this is a nice way to show it, is as the analytes travel, and if all the particles are nominally the same size, there's not this tortuous path that they have to take. So there's no, they go in one particle, and then they see this really big part, they go, uh-oh, got to take a right turn here, and then, got to take a left turn there. And so if they don't have to take that circuitous path, you tend to get this impact of higher plates. And so that's pretty exciting, because plates, you get the square root of that to get to resolution. And so what do we like? What do we need to do? We got to separate stuff. And the more resolution we have, the more ability we have to separate things. And what are we seeing? We're seeing, in some cases, 60% higher plates comparative to the de facto standard in the same particle size of fully porous material. And so you might say, boy, that improvement that I'm getting at the same pressure, higher efficiency, that sort of sounds like an innovation from 2005 called core shell. And you say, okay, well, yeah, well, what they don't tell you about the core shell, or what wasn't really marketed as when they came to market, was that the core shell material is actually monodisperse. The difference is the pore volume around the core shell material. The core shell material surface area, because of the way they make it, they have this sintered core and they grow the layers. And as the analytes get bigger, maybe that impact to the C term becomes more impactful for your resolution. But for small molecules, having the higher surface area, having the ability to just get more retention because of the impact of the surface area can be really, really impactful. So we're getting, with this monodisperse material, with Evosphere, we're getting similar plate counts to what core shell columns are giving. We're giving higher loading capacity because you have more pore volume because of the surface area, accessible surface area, and just pore structure being bigger because it's a fully porous material. What it does is it also unlocks this issue around scalability to prep and semi-prep. All the monodispersed particles, you can now scale them to 10 to 20 to 30 millimeter ID columns. And so we're able to mimic analytical separations for the medicinal chemistry or isolation purification folks. So that's pretty powerful, because now you can take methods even from medicinal and go to AR&D, or take AR&D methods and go back to medicinal. And there's a lot of different steps in between there for getting our important medicines to market. So this unlocked power is really exciting. And then just increased retention due to the surface area. So having more interaction with the phase, having more surface area can be a real benefit, especially if you're trying to retain polar compounds. So a lot of people say, oh, well, can you show me Van Dienter plots? This is one version of the Van Dienter. We're actually working with a very well-recognized collaborator to break down the more impact of the A, B, and C term, so that we can sort of explain it a little bit better. But you can see at low linear velocities, sure, the core shell you might get a little bit of a plate height benefit. But at higher linear velocities, which is what people are normally running at, we're sort of aligned pretty much with the core shell material. But the benefit you're getting is, as you inject more onto the column, you are not losing plates. So you can move faster and not lose plates and inject more. So when you're doing those drug product and drug substance, and you need to see minor impurities, and you want to inject a lot to see those little minor guys that might cause process development to get befuddled, or you might see a peak that you need to know what it is. This gives you that power to do that. So at the end of the day, we do, it's one part of it is the efficiency. Obviously, that's something that you can easily control by reducing the particle size. These products are commercially available in 5, 3, and 1.7. But the selectivity is really the key to resolution. The impact on it tends to be almost linear with resolution. So we did offer this number of chemistries in the Evosphere. And so with that, I'm sure it's going to translate to the work we're doing on the oligonucleotide side. So that gives you sort of the background of the tool for the toolbox to get the separation done. But here's how we're going to apply it so that we get some really unique oligonucleotide separations. So the experimental conditions that we decided to run, so we actually had looked at 3 different phenyl chemistries. We had looked at the phenylhexyl, the diphenyl, and the C18AR, C18 and aryl column. So we were, with the diphenyl, you see very different selectivity, but the oligonucleotides have this long backbone of hydrophobicity. So it actually, the phenylhexyl has a a 6-carbon chain linker, and then the diphenyl actually also has a 6-carbon chain linker. But we're really seeing this benefit of having the hydrophobicity be a major component of the column and the phenyl character here. So it was for this application, the C18AR sort of made sense. What we chose wanted to get the most out of the column. So we chose a 1.7 micron. We chose 2.1 because we intended to move this, sort of the development was being done on an LC, but we want to make sure that we can then translate this method or transfer this method to an LCMS system and then really start picking apart the differences in the oligos. The mobile phase that was chosen for the unmodified oligos is 10 to 30% methanol in 10 minutes. I'll talk about why methanol is important. And then for the modified oligos, it's 15 to 50% methanol in 10 minutes. The temperature, 30 degrees C or 60 degrees C we looked at. We looked at a flow rate of 0.3 mils per minute, an injection volume of 0.5 microliters. We chose a very LC, fancy LC that has minimized extra column volume in the Thermo Scientific Vanquish. We're doing some other work with Thermo on their Neo system with the Evo columns, which is exciting, and there's some applications that we developed with them. Auto sampler temperature was 4 degrees C, and then the UV wavelength is 260 nanometers. So the goals of the experiment were to develop a unique approach for the modified and unmodified oligos. The analysis was for really to do UHPLC UVMS, which achieves the excellent separation without the use of ion pairing reagents. The de facto standard for this work is a hydrophobic column that can be really high pH and high temperature, capable using these ion pair additives. So the ion pair additives, from a chromatographic side, has the benefit of making the analytes more neutral, so you can retain them on the column. And then the HFIP is there more for the ionization in the MS. The problem that you got is these guys, dealing with these guys, create other problems. So you're set up to deal with it now, but when you put ion pair onto a system, it is now an ion pair system. They stick around all the time. So now you're dedicating systems, which is a big capital expenditure expense. And the other thing is that these things are not that nice to be around. You don't want to be breathing these things in. So we sell or we support a company called BeSafe that does some safety stuff to ensure that if you are using these things, you're not breathing them in the lab. But again, from my perspective, I'd want to try to make the mobile phases as simple as possible and try to give myself the most bang for my buck for the instrumentation that I buy that can be pretty expensive. So for the study, we looked at salt concentration, type, and the pH on the separation. So just going back to why we chose Evosphere, it gives you this, the C18AR, it gives you this hydrophobic and steric selectivity. It's excellent for these types of separations. The other thing that is important that I need to point out is the hardware. Oligonucleotides are notorious for sticking to metal surfaces. They are expensive, so when you're injecting this stuff onto a column, the cost of getting a column that has a coated hardware, which is more expensive because one, they're harder to pack, two, you have to have another supplier, coat the column with an inert surface, and then make all the adjustments to the column so that then we can pack it and make a packed bed. So there is a premium on the cost, but when you look at that compared to how much it costs to keep on injecting your oligos and trashing them, it's sort of washed out. So the reason why we chose this is because this is sort of the de facto standard for, gold standard for these types of separations. So on the unmodified oligos, what you look at is from the 5' to 3' direction, you have a 20A, and so A is the 3' tail, 20G, 20C, and then 18HA, which is all adenines. And the modified, these are the ones that are therapeutic impact. So we had to work with collaborators to get the modified analytes, and so some of it is modifying on the backbone, and some of it is modifying on the actual nucleotide sequence. And so the impact here is whether or not the stability for the analyte, the oligo therapeutic analyte, to whether or not be bioavailable or to be controlled. And so they modify these backbones because these are more likely to be what the end product is for the patient. So the DNA is unmodified, just standard DNA backbone, and then the PS20 is this phosphofluorothioated modification, which is extremely popular, and then the methyl 20 is this 2-oxymethyl, and then the MOE 20 is this 2-methoxyethyl modification. So different modifications depending on what the drug company wants to do. The salt concentration that we looked at is ammonium acetate, in 5, 10, 25, and 50 millimolar. Obviously, if you're running MS, you really don't want to be above, 10 to 15, 20, but we looked at it because it gives a whole lot of benefits from an LCUV side. So the impact of the salt type, we looked at ammonium acetate, ammonium formate, and ammonium bicarbonate. And then the salt pH, we looked at 25 millimolar ammonium acetate at pH 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7.5. So retention is on your y-axis, and then the salt concentration are what we looked at. And so, as you modify retention, the goal is, okay, hey, for the different, these guys are pretty polar. You see on a DNA backbone, it's got that, phosphate group there that's charged as the positive charge at low pH. It's going to fly through the column, right, if you're doing reverse phase analysis. So we want to get retention of these guys. So the more salt we put in there, you could see the retention starts to creep up. And that's sort of consistent. And then when you look at on the right, it really starts to, well, at least from the unmodified, that's what we see. And then we see the same thing on the modified. Obviously, the more salt we get, the more it starts to retain more onto the column, which makes sense. The type of salt we chose for the unmodified on the left, you see ammonium formate is a big additive for retention in some cases, but in other cases, not so much. And then you see really on the right with the modified, you see that ammonium formate does give more retention. So there's ways to play with this, and we've looked at all of them, but we chose ammonium acetate as the concentration, and that's because that sort of gave us in the pH range where we wanted to be to get the most stable retention times. So this was retention, looking at all of those, and you can see across all of them, we weren't seeing these shifting retention times, which is what you were sort of looking for. So on the left, this is for the DNA 20 oligos. So that is 10 to 30% methanol in 10 minutes, and you can see just the difference of 5 millimolar, 10 millimolar, 25 millimolar, and 50, just these needle thin peaks. And so this is really zoomed in. but the detector response for this type of an analyte, obviously, as you increase the salt concentration, you're going to get those really sharp peaks. But if we want to change the LCMS, the MS can't really deal with that much salt. So we were looking for this area where we can do LCUV for the folks that are doing process monitoring and have this ubiquitous method to maybe take it over to LCMS. When you look at the peak shape for the modified oligos, we had great peak shapes across all the different modifications and at 15 to 50% methanol. The key point, I said I was going to come back to it. Why did we choose methanol? So acetonitrile is known as, it's sort of in the literature, dampens pi-pi interactions. And if you look at these single-stranded oligos with this backbone, you have a lot of pi-pi systems hanging out on one side of the oligo, depending on whether or not it moves and in the way it sits out. But if it's open and it has that pi-pi interaction, you want to sort of incentivize the column to deliver those pi-pi interactions for retention. And so even though these aren't needle thin for the phosphorothioated modification, which is one that they want to look at a lot and does give very tight peaks for the ion pair, you can adjust this. I could compress the gradient there to sort of focus on that if I were all phosphorothioated. So we're working to sort of move that forward to improve the phosphorothioated, and we've had some feedback saying, hey, all our oligos are phosphorothioated. And it's like, okay, well, maybe we can look at adjusting it so that we can get a better, sharper peaks for that. But I don't see that as a real problem. I think that's just some more method development that we can do. I think the key thing is, can you retain it? Because it's highly polar, without using ion pair, and that's the thing that we've really been able to hone in on. What we're excited about, though, is the power of the material. So the separation of these unmodified sequences, isomers, 12 to 20%. You can look at the last base pair. This is not normal. Like, you don't usually see one chromatographic peak separated for one base pair change. That's not a normal thing you see. That's showing the power of that compressed A term, and the higher efficiency that they're getting. And then earlier in the sample, you're seeing those are the process impurities that also still retain. Those are all charged. Those are variants. Because anytime you make any kind of modification, you're not going to get 100% of the reaction. So you have all these sort of side chain reactions that are going on, and you still got to get that out of the sample for the patient. So, those are things that if you wanted to scale this method up to prep, that would be something that you could do. And we offer the max hardware in prep sizes. So again, here, the separation of the sequence isomers, you're seeing a similar thing, just the power, one oligonucleotide change, and you're seeing, enough to say, for the biologic type folks where they're like peak to valley, you're seeing a huge benefit for trying to understand how much of those analytes are there and understanding it in a better way. Sort of similar thing here, separation of the sequence isomers. I think you're, again, now full resolution, and these are just different ones, but you can see baseline separation of all four here. Again, that 25 millimolar ammonium acetate was what we used for the LCUV side, but I think from an LCMS perspective, 10, 12.5, 15 millimolar would be fine. 60 degrees C, you're getting really long lifetimes, and you're getting the retention that you're looking for. So this is an unpurified RNA oligonucleotide separation. So this is changing those thymines to uracil, and it was desalted after the synthesis without any additional purification. And when you magnify it in, just the amount of retention and peak shape and separation that you get on the Evosphere Max C18AR column was really exciting. And so, and then again, we see that here with the unpurified RNA oligonucleotides. You zoom in and you can really start seeing how much the column is retaining for these compounds that would normally either not retain with just salt or coelute. And then again, we sort of show the same thing here. So the one thing to point out here on the modified oligonucleotide separation, we did see on the methyloxy, we saw sort of a base pair change. So this is actually 3, 2, 1. Could we pull apart 2 and 3? Probably, but again, we were scouting so many different ones. Could we, if that was the key separation, the key mode, could we do something there to, look at maybe ammonium formate or other additives key. So, again, this was just looking at ammonium acetate, and always you can benefit for further method development. The point here is you see 2 start to pop out, but this is actually in the elution order of 1, 2, 3. And this is the methyl ethyloxy modified system. So with that, all that data that I just showed, at the time that we generated it, we were submitting it to JChromA. We're excited to say that all that data has been published in JChromA. So if you would like the link to the publication where we talk about, why this is important, getting the people to use these and moving forward, we can give that. We went through the errata stage so that we've updated it now. And we're just really excited to continue to extend the work. Since that data was published, we actually introduced the evosphere material in a 300 angstrom on 4 chemistries. And so for those bigger oligos, those double-stranded oligos, we're starting to learn how the C12 and C4 and diphenyl interact, depending on if the oligo is really big, depending on the modification. There's some impact. Some requests have come in for making Hillick versions of these columns, which we're working on. Whether it's silica or in the future, we have some other bonded phases that we've looked at. And then we also extended the MAX hardware to the bio line. So for the conclusions and future work, the C18AR is a viable candidate to evaluate potential non-ion pair mobile phase systems for modified and unmodified single-stranded oligonucleotides. We're going to evaluate the 300 angstrom C18AR as well. We recently, on a separate note, we just validated a method for semaglutide. So anything peptide, that size, oligonucleotide, as a starting point for method development, the C18AR really has some advantages. Obviously, the double-stranded oligos can be bigger and more polar. So, we could look at Hillick phases on wider pores. Really come to us. Call into MacMod or talk to me at the CACA events about what is really troubling you, and we'll make sure to at least point you in the right direction and try to solve really your difficult problems. We've seen some feedback from customers that they want us to help them improve their SPE workups. So we have a collaboration on the SPE side that we'll be able to show some data on soon. And then I'm saying to get that for the oligonucleotides side of it. And then we've also been asked, hey, look, I have my existing ion pair methods that are working great, but a little more resolution is always a positive. And could I run this on 100 angstrom C12? So the thing about these ion pairs is they tend to have pHs around 9.7 to 10. They tend to run really hot, so you need a phase that is high pH stable. So right now we've been testing the C12. So you get all the benefits of the evosphere. It's available in the Max hardware. So for your traditional ion pair, we would, and the C12 is pH stable from 1 to 11.5 because of the optimized bonding density. So with that, I think we're really positioned well to solve some of these future problems of oligonucleotides, and happy to take any questions that you have. And thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you very much, Geoff. Yeah, so now is our Q&A session. Yeah, so for our attendees, so if you have questions, so probably you can feel free to unmute yourself and then ask directly. And also, obviously, you can also type in your questions into the chat box. So yeah, if you have any questions. Okay, yes. Yeah, I think Perry, you need to unmute yourself.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes. Yeah, we can hear.
Jeff, good job.
Thanks, Perry. How are you doing?
Yeah, good. Question for you. So
Sure.
I know you show a few chromatograms. Looks like you are using an isocratic mode. I'm just curious if you use gradient, can it improve your resolution better, or have you tried it before?
Yeah, so we actually did, if I didn't say this initially, we had worked with Copernicus University with Sylwia Kowalska group, and they've been exploring different gradients. A lot of the work was gradient through with methanol. I think I had talked about it earlier. If you can see right here. Sorry, right there. So the standard scouting was 10 to 30% for the unmodified in methanol in 10 minutes, and then in the modified it was 15 to 50% in 10 minutes. So yeah, gradient is for this is sort of the de facto standard.
So in some of your slide, you mentioned you use ammonia acetate or ammonia formate. So they just want to make this method is compatible with LCMS. Is that correct?
Yeah, so that was the goal because there's other key impurities when they're running these that they're looking for. So and also normally with the existing ion pairs, they're not easily getting one base pair change. So you're getting so much. So they would have. So if essentially they're like, well, we have to use mass spec to do any mass monitoring to know if what's present and in your validated method. But the power here is we're getting one base pair change on the oligonucleotide. So you're getting a lot of power out of the LCUV side that you can monitor early reaction monitoring, and then say you have multiple backbone in the same, so they update the backbone or they make modifications. You could have side reactions that they have to deal with, and so then obviously just the mass spec, and then those Orbitraps and those really high res mass specs or Bruker systems are really the de facto standard there, and that's what they'll end up doing. The good news is we can make not only these columns in the hardware at 2.1, but we can go all the way down to capillary, down to 75 micron as well. So for people doing omics work or wanting to explore oligonucleotides in really low capillaries, we can do that as well.
Okay, you just turn to the right slide. So in this slide, on the bottom from the second line, your sample temperature you set at -4 degrees C. Is that correct? It's on purpose or typo?
No, it's 4 degrees C. That's just my dash there.
Oh,
sorry. Yeah,
okay.
no. Yeah.
Okay, yes. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Another thing, in your last slide, you mentioned you do have the capacity to modify your packing material to deal with helix, right?
Yes.
I think that's the right direction.
Yeah. So some of it depends because what we're getting here is on a normal packing material with what we've seen, and I'm just saying this is my opinion. What we've seen from this packing material, because of the surface area is so high and the bond and density is so high, we're seeing more, moderate polar retention than what you would see in a standard packing material, at least what I've seen recently. So, we have a method that we're working with nitrosamines, where we're able to separate MDMA and DMF, and 3, 4, 5 minutes on LCUV. So what I would tell you is that the material itself is having more retention benefits, and so that can lead to sort of opening up the polar retention. So yeah, if the analytes are log P's of -4, 5, 6, sure, you're going to need Hillic. I mean, that is the problem with Hillic is you can have that retention shifts, and so
Sure.
it's very difficult, especially people get really anxious that they have to, send a Hillic method to QC. So they're always trying to redevelop it back to. But for research, yeah, sure, for 100%, Hillic is definitely the way to go, at least to get a full understanding of what's in your sample. So we've looked at, we have a non-bonded version now, and then we're going to have some bonded versions as well, and then different pore sizes for Hillic applications.
Thank you, Geoff. That's all I have.
You're welcome, Perry.
Okay, thank you, Perry. Yeah, so Geoff, I have a question. So what's a column lifetime for this application?
Yeah, so because it's not ion pair, so we're not having, with the salts are pretty usable at that pH. We're not having to work at those extended pHs and extended temperatures to get the stuff on and off the column. We're seeing comparable lifetimes to what we would normally see for any small molecule application, and especially because we coated the hardware with the Silica Tech coatings from a partner company in State College. So the hardware is coated with their, which we'll actually be giving a talk on at PitCon. But the hardware is coated with their, so then you're not having that like secondary interaction from either the hardware or the frit or the high surface area there. So we've really been excited about the fact that you're getting a lot of separation capacity. So you're not having any of these, because again, ion pair, even with the coated hardware, you're still having to operate at the outsides of where the silica likes to be. And so you tend to go to these hybrid silicas, which can work there, but again, it's not like the lifetimes, it's not like the column wants to be at that pH. It can do it, but it doesn't want to be. And so then you're at like, well, batch to batch and lots of lot issues. And it's like if the column didn't have to work so hard, again, the bonded phase can work better, then you really have a powerful solution. So I guess to your question, what I would say is lifetime has not been shown to be any issue. We have not seen any sort of lifetime issues with this column.
Okay, great. Thank you. Yeah, so then here I have some other questions. So can you scale the non-ion pair separations for preparative separations?
Yes, actually. So it was interesting. We were at the HPLC meeting, and they were doing a company that focuses in oligonucleotides was doing preparative oligonucleotide separations, and they had to use these ion pair methods, and in the preparative side, and they were destroying the column itself. So the column lasted, I think they said they got 10 or 15 injections on any of these are expensive columns, 30 millimeter ID columns can be pretty expensive. So what we've done is we're working with the company for the coatings company to scale for the oligos to scale. So we have coated prep columns, which is exciting. So yeah, we can scale this method directly to prep up to 5 micron particle sizes now. Anything other than that, it would have to be a custom type of solution. But yeah, 5 micron preps up to 30 mil IDs and 250 mil links.
Okay, great. Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, so I'm just curious. So because this work is without the ion pair, so then have you ever tried the ion pair mobile phase with C18AR column?
So the C18AR, so there's been some studies done by Eli Lilly where they look at, some different kinds of ion pairs and how they interact with bonded phases. So because we're adding that aryl bonded phase, we're sort of steering away from anything that would sort of interact, that would diminish the phenyl character of the analyte. But what we have done is we have seen some separations from our customers that are using the C12 because that's only one mode of interaction. It's that hydrophobic interaction. So the ion pairs, those classic ion pair methods, we're suggesting using the C12 phase chemistry.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, sounds good. So then, just curious, did you evaluate other types of the column, the final based bonded phase?
Yeah. So in the original scope of work, they had looked, the Polish university had looked at amide chemistries. They had looked at reverse phase C18. They had looked at actually an extended alkyl cyano phase chemistry and a similar chemistry to the C18ER, where it's a hydrophobic phenyl modified chemistry. So we sort of knew the goal was, hey, we see that you've done this type of work, and you're talking about. So in the paper we talk about this pi-pi stacking mechanism that they sort of believe is happening on the single-stranded oligos. So our initial study was like, well, if that's the case, you might want to look at our different phenyl-based chemistry. So we gave them the phenyl hexyl, the C18AR, and the diphenyl, and they did run all the same separations that I showed on those as well. And it just happened that the hydrophobicity component to this is a real benefit because of, I think, the backbone of the oligo itself has just so much hydrophobic nature that the pi-pi stacking, the differences are really just between the how much pi-pi character is actually out there, hanging out there in the mobile phase that can impact the stationary phase is minor. So you could argue like, hey, maybe we could do other things on the bonded phase, but I think right now the C18AR really is a great step forward for that. So yeah, we did look at the diphenyl and phenyl hexyl, but the C18AR was the one that really shined.
Mm-hmm. All right, great. Yeah. So now I think we need to move on. So then the next part, we are going to launch the poll questions. So here we have 2 poll questions. So here is the first one. Yeah, so the poll question is for our audience. Yeah, please input your vote. Okay, so then I'm going to close the first poll question and then start the second poll question. Okay, so now we have the second poll question. Great, thank you very much for your response. Okay, yeah, so please put your response for the poll questions. Okay, yeah, so then I'm going to close the second poll question. Okay, yeah, so now it's conclude today's session. So once again, thank you very much, Geoff, for bringing in the new technology and the applications of this wonderful technology. So yeah, I believe this will benefit a lot for the community who working with the nucleotide analysis. So thanks again. And also, I would like to thank our audience. Thank you for your time with us for today's webinar. And finally, this is a little bit broadcast of our next activity. So that is at the PeterCon, we are going to have the networking session workshop on Sunday afternoon, and also we are going to have the dinner event on Monday evening. So then welcome to attend, and I'm looking forward to seeing you there. Okay. Yeah, so if you have any questions, feel free to reach us. So then, yeah, you can find our contact information through the link, the webinar link. Okay, bye-bye, and then see you next time.
Bye.
Okay, bye-bye.